Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Collar Angst podcast, where we dive deep into the realm of any and really everything blue collar. We're going to take a look at a wide range of trades and careers that range from welders and electricians to police officers and everything in between. The guests we bring on the show, the listeners, really essentially you, are the fuel that keep this whole thing going. With that being said, please enjoy, and as always, like, subscribe, follow, do whatever it is that you do to stay up to date so that you don't miss a thing. Thanks. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Blue Collar Angst. This week we have a really special guest with us, Josh Richman out of Roosevelt, Utah. He's somebody that I know from work. He's a fitter. He welds on structural steel, and just a really positive guy. Before we get into that, I just wanted to kind of talk about one thing. As many of you guys have heard, or maybe through the grapevine, Connor, the co-host here that I've been with the last 15 episodes, he decided to step away and pursue options in his own career right now with the company that he's at, and just want to wish him well. The first 15 were awesome, and he stepped away willingly and really just for time so that he could focus on building his career. So commend him for that, and for the first 15, all the mentalities and the perspectives that he shared. So appreciative of him, and give him a shout out if you guys see him. If you guys want to share some love, send in a message, and I'll make sure to get it over to him. Moving forward, the show has to go on, right? So today, Josh Richman out of Roosevelt, Utah. Like I said, fitter. He's been in the oil field. He has a really cool experience, guys. His life is something that it made me look. We talked a little bit before, and we started recording. It made me really think about my life and just some of the things that I've gone through, and made me consider things I've never thought about before. So really, truly a treat for everybody out there, for people struggling with addiction to alcohol or drugs, things like that. Josh is going to talk about that too, some of his story and where he's at now and why he's there. So how are you doing, man?
Good, man. Joshua Richman here, a recovering drug addict, alcoholic as well. I don't drink, I don't drug. I'm very cautious about even medication from the doctor. That's how I kind of live my life today. I guess let's just kind of dive into a little bit. Being a kid from Roosevelt, Utah, as you was talking about, it was all about growing up and working in the oil field where I was from. Small town, everybody owned a business in the oil field. That's kind of what was betrayed as growing up. You were going to work for one of these companies. There was Newfield, Anadarko. You was going to work in one of these fields. That's what you was going to do. So with that being said, at a very young age, just really my dad died. I'll just kind of dip into some things to why I got into such drug use, or where some things started fouling up. I'll touch on blue collared a lot too as I go on. I'm going to hit a lot of recovery stuff because I just want people to understand like they're not alone wherever they're at in their position in their life, and things happen. And one thing I've learned, the older that I've got, I've taken that power back in my life. Right, I'm able to control my life today, and honestly, I'm pretty happy with a simple life, and I've pretty much always done blue collar work. With that being said, at a young age, my dad died. That caused this male figure thing throughout my whole life. I was trying to always find a male role model, and honestly, they always left me. The ones that I would find. I wasn't really close with both sides of my family. One side of my family, when my dad died, he's a Richman. With that being said, when he died, I wasn't close with that family very much. Like it's not that they didn't have nothing to do with me. We just weren't very close. And then my other side of my family was the Huxfords, and I had some other siblings, and they took care of them. And I was kind of like the sibling that my mom kind of took care of growing up. So with that being said, I just wasn't really close with that side, either side. I mean, the Huxfords, I would say I was the closest with. My grandpa would be the main father figure you could say I have, and I kind of realized that as I got older. But until then, I always picked like my friends' dads to be my role models, and to be these things, and they always would choose their own kids over me, which today I understand. Like I don't blame them, and actually some of those men are were men that I look up to in very many ways. Um, I actually respect the fact of the stuff they did teach me at a young age. But back then, I shunned away from that, right? It was like they would choose their kids. They would kind of, I would go back home. They weren't my dad, needless to say, they weren't my real father figure at that time. I mean, they were to some extent, but I was not what I was seeking. So with that being said, I kind of lived on self pity for a long time. Oh, my dad died, and it sucks because this life, a lot of things happen to a lot of us. People die, and we have a hard time dealing with it. I totally understand that, and it doesn't always just heal. And with that being said, I just always, for me now knowing that I lived on self pity and those negative emotions for so long, I try to stay away from them. I share what happened to me to share to somebody else to hopefully get through to them, and hopefully they understand, like, hey, maybe they're struggling with some of those negative emotions, and they're putting negative stuff out in the universe, and they're not getting positive stuff back. They don't always understand why. And a lot of times, because a lot of people don't really want to be around people that are being self pity, like, oh, pity me, pity me. In AA, there's a saying, pity me, pour me, pour me, pour me another drink. They say that a lot, and it's so true. So with that being said, like, I lived on that forever with my dad, and eventually I start trying to become my own man, and I don't know how to be my own man. So I start getting in fights. I start smoking weed and drinking about age 11. No, age 11, I start smoking weed. I drink. First time I ever drank, I pissed my pants, and honestly, I hated drinking. It was embarrassing. I was
And
embarrassed. It sucked. I was just like, why would I do this? But it made me feel kind of superior to some extent for some reason, and I kind of clinged on to that feeling, and then I smoked some weed. Um, this kind of a situation when I smoked weed was actually somebody in my life at the time was a father figure to me, and I looked up to a lot, and my excuse was this person would whoop my butt and beat me. That's why I'm not going to smoke weed, right? Because I was against it. Because what happened? My dad actually died of a drug overdose. I probably missed that part, but with that being said, that the drugs were around my family's enough that I didn't want to ever do it. I hated smoking cigarettes. I was against it. I played sports year round as a kid, for the most part. But when that happened, the smoking weed thing, that was the father figure thing. I looked up to this person, and they completely was like allowing me to do that. And honestly, like, I was nervous, and also I was let down at the same time, because that was somebody I kind of went to for that guidance to tell me no and to keep moving forward. And they allowed it. It was kind of a depressing thing, because I kind of got more depressed through that moment and those times. And then I started smoking weed. I'm going into high school. I was playing traveling basketball. I made the team prior this year, in the high school, but I'm smoking weed, and a lot of the guys I'm playing basketball with, a lot of them are actually guys I grew up with and were good friends of mine. I'm not saying, like, I had a good family. We dealt with the cards that we were dealt, and today I stand on a foundation with my family, especially my mom, and I love my mom to death. So don't get nothing misconstrued too much. It's just, you can say I was with families that had families really put together, right? They had both parents that both worked, that nourished the home. My mom nourished the home the best she could. And today I understand that. She was a single mom. My mom was going to school. Like, today she's an RN. You know what I mean? My mom is a very successful woman in many ways, and I commend my mom and I look up to her for those things. But at this time in my life as a kid with the basketball team, I'm starting to hang out with some other kids that they're doing smoking weed or whatever. And my good friends, you can say, that I'm playing sports with, it got brought up. I can't remember if we were playing night games one night or whatnot, but they're like, "Hey, man, like, why are you doing this to your life?" They kind of did pull me aside at one point, and I commend them for that. Like, they're good people, and I hated these guys for a long time after this. I was like, oh, they don't care about me, but they had to look out for their own lives, and at a young age, they were mature enough to do that, and I lost all hope at that time. Like, that's really what was going on to me. Because as soon as
dude,
I went
that
to high school, go ahead, you're
I
good.
was gonna say, it's so interesting. I have friends I was dumb in high school, like smoking
Right.
weed, drinking. You know, I don't know why for me personally, I could like drop things, but I had friends, one of my really good friends, he's actually passed away um, a couple of years ago, but you know, that friend in particular, I can remember just like he couldn't just try. Like it was just like this thing where it was like even weed, like people are like, oh,
Yeah.
it's a gateway drug, it's this and that. And I mean, that's up for debate. I think it's a gateway to the people in that environment
Yeah.
into a different drug, right? But
Right.
it's always been interesting. I'm like, I wonder why some people get hooked on it like so quick, right? And like there'd be times I'd be like I drank a handful of times, and like he would
Yeah.
be like, "Do we need to do it every day?" And I was like, "Dude, just relax." You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's like
Yeah.
kids, you're
Yeah.
trying to like learn yourself, and it's such a weird time. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just that's what you made me think of. Like those
Yeah.
kids leaving from the basketball team, they're probably like probably pretty religious kids, right? Growing up in like Utah, so
Some of them, yeah. It's
yeah,
kind of, yeah. Yes, they had just put together lives. I mean, a few of them were religious. I remember this one kid, he was our center. I won't use names, but he's this real tall guy. Awesome dude. And we were like best friends for a long time. Like these guys, like I was best friends for a long time, and a lot of them were best friends. Their older siblings were good friends with my older siblings or my brother. I wouldn't say they were. I don't know if they went to church, but you know what? They read the Bible. I remember once a week that his dad would come get him if we were playing or hanging out and say, "Hey, we got to go do this for an hour, right?" And they would go into a room. They'd let me stay there and hang out. I should have went and listened to the Bible, right? Because I'm a totally God person today, and I'll probably dive in a little bit more of that too. But a lot of that, yeah, they had put together things going on in their life. So, yeah, I don't know. I just brought up the Bible things. You kind of brought up religion. I was just kind of thinking like they didn't go to
no,
church, but they were people that believed, and had faith and wanted to learn, and
yeah,
at that time I was just like I just wanted to fit in. Like that was me, I didn't fit in. And that's why the drugs and the smoking weed, I was the guy that wanted to drink every day. I smoked weed before going to basketball practice when I was on that traveling basketball team. Um, and this is kind of a weird thing, but where I'm from, it's a small town, so it's like you got to have a last name to get certain places per se, right? I'm not saying they won't help people they don't care about and these things, but there's just families that have lived there for generations and generations and generations, right? So in that town, to be on certain teams, especially if there's certain people coaching, they're not going to pick you unless they know your parents, right? They're not going to pick you unless their dad works for them or their dad works with them. Like it really is that concept of that town. And I know some families there would beg to differ, but I would say go look at the history, because my family was in the middle of it, you could say. To get on to get on this football team, and it's funny because this is the first football season I played in fourth grade. I actually quit. Um, which sucks, right? I went back to football 2 years later and loved it when I played for a different coach. But this coach was like one of the main coaches. And my grandpa had to make a phone call to somebody to call somebody to get me on that team, right? Like that's how it worked. And I was in fourth grade. I was just a kid, but to get on that team, because for whatever reason, this guy played in the NFL. He's a coach, a big standing name where I'm from, probably one of the richest families where I'm from, yada, yada. Um, very, and that's another thing. Like people may have money, but you can tell some people at times. I don't know if he's like this anymore, but at times people are very arrogant. And for someone like me, I was just a kid that pulled up in jeans. But I was pretty athletic. Um, it's just weird. It's just a weird concept where I'm from. I'm totally grateful to move to the city. And dive into there a little bit. Should I finish kind of where I was going, I guess, with the kid
yeah,
thing
dude.
and
Yeah, I was
dive
just
into
gonna say
that?
too, like the dynamics of like a small town. It's interesting. I,
Mm-hmm.
I have one friend, really close friend that I grew up with, and he moved out to a smaller town in Idaho.
Right.
And he kind of got into the drugs and the alcohol, and he was kind of like you were saying you were, right? Like my other friends that were like, dude, we need to drink every day or we need to do this. And
Right.
I just remember, he moved to a small town, and all of a sudden, like his life just like changed. Like I don't know what it is. It's kind of
Yeah.
weird, like because there is like the names in the small towns that are like really big and
Yeah.
popular. But then I look
Yeah.
at it too, and I think about it, like prepping for this episode, man. Like knowing a little bit about like Roosevelt, Vernal area. And it's
Right.
like, dude, that's a small town. It's like in my head, I'm like, where do these drugs come from? And it's like, I don't know why such
Right.
small towns, have the problems with the drugs and all that stuff, which we'll probably
Yeah.
get into, but just a
Right.
random thought.
Right. Though it is kind of funny, because it's funny because we come to the city to get the drugs and bring them to the small towns. I mean, that's because I did that for a while too. I did it for a long time. It became part of my job per se, because I made money. You know, it is weird, but small towns you charge twice as much. That's kind of how it goes, right? In a smaller town, you charge twice as much, so you really can make a decent little living going 3 hours away somewhere to pick up some and then come back and get rid of the drugs. As well as through Roosevelt, there is a back main road that goes to like Colorado. There's like right? So if you kind of look at a lot of these small towns, I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them will have like a main back road that goes to another major city. So there actually are people driving through those points, dropping off large quantities of drugs, because it's a back way. They're instructed to not drive on main for certain roads or whatever, because there's task force and stuff that are trying to get to the bottom of everything, and they're generally going to watch your busiest areas. So a lot of people are actually trying to look for, oh, well, I can go this way, and it takes almost just as much time. And then you find some people in those towns and you sell it for twice as much. Well, I just made twice as much money as when I get to my destination.
Yeah,
There's those
that's,
little strategies.
did you do that stuff like in high school, like before 18? Were you kind of like
Yeah,
in that?
yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll drive into that a little bit, right? So I get into high school, not playing sports, the whole friend thing, right? Because that's what I'm all worried about. But now I got a new set of friends, and I had some really good friends too in high school. But I got my first possession of paraphernalia in ninth grade. I got suspended for like a month, right? And then they let me come back to school, and I get a distribution of marijuana. So this is I mean, I'm not really necessarily selling drugs at this point in time. I passed a joint. Seriously, passed a joint. So there I was, got that distribution of marijuana charge, and I ended up having to go to an O&A, observation and assessment. So I had to go to like this other 45-day program. Um, with that being said, though, I got in more trouble because I wasn't previously doing like gal that I got in trouble with. They didn't have charges. They were out in 8 days. I think they wrote statements against me. I can't remember, right? This was a long time ago, so I can't exactly remember. But I want to say they wrote like statements against me. It was just like, yeah, I passed the joint to so and so. Yeah, I passed the joint to so and so. And I was the kid that they gave me the statement. The police officer was like, here, write your statement about what happened. And I'm like, bam, not writing a statement, right? That was my mentality. I even had my PO at the time tried to get me one time because he's like, hey, if you just tell me where you were at partying, I'll let you go home. I was all, dude, I'll go lock me up. And I spit in his face, like that's how I was. Because I knew the kind of lifestyle I was getting into for me, right? That's just kind of how it was. Here I am getting aggressive because of a man, right? Also, I don't know what a man was, but all of a sudden I started realizing my aggression and fighting gave me some kind of power, right? It's a negative power. It's completely negative, completely manipulative. It's just like as a kid, when we are a kid, we start manipulating life by throwing fits to get fed, right? So here I am now as an adult, throwing adult fits, fighting people to get my way, and that was generally because I just wanted to feel accepted. I wanted to feel like a man. So if I could beat you up, I felt like a man. And that's completely wrong. So with that being said, that happened. A few years down the road, we'll get into some AA stuff too, because I ended up starting to go to AA. My mom takes me to AA, but I get that charge. I get suspended from school for a year, um, and I get out of O&A. But I start using again. I start using methamphetamine about this time. I'm about 15, and some guys that I'm hanging out with, and this other girl I'm hanging out with, they get locked up. And I'm like, they get locked up because they're hanging out with me. And actually, my PO came to where I worked, and he was trying to UA me at my work. And that's actually, I think they can do it today, but back then I wrote and signed a thing that said they would not bother me at my place of employment. And my boss was really good friends with all the police officers. And my boss was there when they came in trying to pull me out of work in UAME, and she lost it on them. You know what I mean? She stood up for me, which was cool. But at that point in time, I knew I was going to fail that UA. So I went home, packed my stuff, and I skipped on down the road. And I went to Wyoming, right? I found this other guy, went to Wyoming, I ended up running away back to Salt Lake. And I get caught up with some guys and some Hispanics. And from there, we decide to run away to Tijuana, Mexico, because we are actually looking to go live in Michoacan. I believe it was Michoacan. We lived in Muay Thai when we got down there for a while, which is crazy because it's one of the leading, at the time, it was one of the leading or highest places of kidnappings of Americans. It's kind of funny. It's actually, this car tried to take off with me. So we get down to Mexico, anyhow. And Mexico, people were in lines to buy methamphetamine. It's like everybody just gets high. Everybody's getting loaded. We're stealing stuff everywhere to provide for our habits. You can pay cops off to let you go. I mean, that happened. We got pulled over. We had some stuff with us. We end up paying the police officers, and they let us go.
Dude, how is that? Like, I've been to Mexico before. Like, even just
Yeah,
like Cancun, they
yeah,
they look like SWAT teams, right? Like in Tijuana, where
yeah,
they
yeah.
were suited up.
Yeah, so I had first time I ever had a gun held to my head was actually we just got in a fight with some Hispanics, and we took off running, and we get in this car and we're driving. Well, we get pulled over because they have a truck with like four of them with assault rifles on the back, right? They got these hangers they're hanging on. Then they pull up in a van. They're like, "Bomb," They're speaking in Spanish. We don't know what's going on. Well, they search the car we're in. There's a knife, just a freaking knife in there, and they throw us all in this van and they handcuff us and they put me in that van. I'm talking to my buddy, like, dude, what do you think's going on? Like, we're going to jail. And the police officer like kicked me and put the gun in my head. Cállate, cállate, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get shot just speaking English.
You 18 years old at this time in Mexico?
No, I'm 15.
Oh my gosh, man,
Yeah, crazy, right?
that's wild.
15 years old, living down there. The guy I'm down there with, I'm running away from probation. He broke out of the youth detention center in Vernal, jumped out, climbed the wall, right? So here we are though in Mexico, and that happens. Well, now my mom, she's very sad that she has lost her son, which I understand. And she was dating this guy at the time, um, which actually was saving up for a vacation for them, but decided to give my mom all the money to come find me, right? Which was cool of him. That guy, just to speak on him a little bit, he was decent for some stuff, but he also played another huge role. So we ended up getting a fight. I got an assault charge against him, so I walked out and beat my mom up. I'm not cool with that. I'm never going to be cool with any man hitting a woman my whole life. I'll never be okay with that. But with that being said, the guy at the time with my mom, cool guy at the time, sends some money. She comes, looks for me. She gets a bodyguard. She comes down with my older brother. They drive into Tijuana and they go to some clubs. And they start asking, like, "Hey, have you seen this guy? And this kid." And they're offering money to some people, and that is like a huge no, right? Because now my mom's flashing money, paying money to find me, and then she runs into some people that know me because yeah, we went to the clubs all the time. I'm 15, I can go to clubs, so yeah, we're in clubs all the time, drinking, we're walking around, doing whatever. They call me a Rojo. It's actually red. Rojo. But with that being said, these cousins to this Hispanic guy we went down there with, they come and want me to talk to my mom, and they tell me to get in this car, and it's only got two doors, so they put me in the back seat, and they're like, "Here, call your mom." I'm gonna call my mom. Well, they won't let me call my mom. I can't remember exactly how it went down. So long ago, and it was like a panic moment. They tried taking off with me in the car, but that guy we were down there with, he kind of saw what was going on. He's like, "Josh is getting into a two-door car in the back. Like, that's not cool. Like, what's going on, right? Like, he should not even be in the car. Why is he in the car?" And he ran up to the windows. They tried driving off with me, and he slugs the dude, grabs the keys, yanks him out, pulls that dude out, gets me out, and they're just like, "Run," right? They just tell me to run. So I think my buddies with me at the time. We just ran. because I think they just didn't know if like there were going to be more cars or more people try to snag me up or us up or whatever. And we end up getting back together, and then we're all kind of freaking out, like what just happened, And we'll come to find out, my mom's going around with money. And that's kind of, they were like, they were going to kidnap me and hold me ransom kind of deal. Like that's what we thought was going to happen, right? Those were the actions that were taking place. And I was like, screw this. I don't even want to be here no more. So I actually decided to come back across the border with my buddy. I hitchhike all the way back to San Diego, call my mom. Needless to say, she tells me this big old lie that she's going to have that bodyguard bring me a package because at this point she's back in Utah. And I'm like, okay, I'll wait for this package because there's money in it. I wait for like 4 hours and then we get swarmed by cops. Burn! This 7-Eleven in San Diego. They arrest us, yada, yada. Go to DT. And that was my first exposure to being locked up in a different facility than Utah. So this is, I'll touch on this a little bit. Like I'm grateful to live in Utah and I love Utah for many reasons. There's so many things why, and it's generally because of all the stuff that I've been through. So at this point, I'm getting locked up. My roommate only speaks my roommate only speaks Spanish, and that's it, just Spanish. Nice guy though, right? Like cool, but that's it. And I'm like, man, this sucks, right? And then we get locked up into the cells. You got to walk around like this, right? Like you have to keep your hands in your armpits, or they're going to pepper spray you. But it's not even pepper spray. It's called OC spray. I guess they switch it from time to time or something because people start to not care and it doesn't bother them as much. And it's just gang city, dude. Gang city, I remember going to a classroom and these African American kids were trying to fight me, or they're running their mouth behind me because I'm a redhead. And I've always kind of caught a little bit of stuff from other ethnicities because of being redheaded. But nothing like crazy. But these guys are like, they're bullying me, right? I'm not gonna take it. So I stood up on my desk, like, what's up, dude? This guy, and he stands up like he's ready to get it, but like three other guys stand up behind him, and they're ready to get it. And I'm like, I'm about to get jumped, right? They're in a gang, they're gonna jump me. But then every white person in that classroom stood up to have my back. At that moment in time, now it made sense of the movies and the stuff you see, and I don't really condone all that, but now I understand like why there's this race thing that goes on when we're locked up, or when people get locked up. So in that moment, it kind of made me like, whoa, like it just weirded me out, right? They backed off, they sat down, I sat down, we all just continued class. It was just weird.
That's totally different though, dude, than like what you were used to probably, right? Like going to juvies in Utah and then going to San Diego. I was going to ask, when you came back to the United States, did you like cross the border legally, or did you like, how'd you do that?
Yeah, and they harassed, I mean, they didn't like harass, but they asked so many questions to get across the border, but obviously we were Caucasian, we were kids. We weren't even that old. We made up a story because I had a high school ID and that was it. Made up a story that we went down for graduation and lost everything besides this one ID, and we were trying to get back. Made up a big story, and I probably didn't line up. And I think they went through all our stuff. They searched us, but they just kind of were like, screw it, just go through, right? And I don't even know if we had a correct ID, honestly, at the time, because I don't know if it was like mine or his, and I don't even know. We might have used fake names. I can't exactly remember. I know we lied a lot. I know that we made up a huge story. And they did interrogate us and like search everything, but then they let us across the border, because ultimately, if we were kids and if we would have used our names, I would assume they would have arrested us then. But I don't think we used our names because we did make it into San Diego. I can't remember exactly how it went down, right? It was kind of a haze, you can say. But getting into Mexico, it was easy, bro. We literally just drove right over the border into Mexico. Not even a big deal. But driving to America, well, we didn't drive, we were walking. A little more difficult, but still was plausible as being an American,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy, dude. 15 years old. Getting into
15 years old. Wild. Just
makes me think of Narcos, dude. Like all those like movies they talk about, and it's like, dude, the kidnapping story. I'm like, damn. you know?
Yeah, dude, and the coyotes and stuff are real. You know, like that's another thing. Like we got hit up all the time. Like you guys are American. You guys will give you a brand new car. You drive across border, drop off these people in the trunk. You know, like they offer you all sorts of stuff. You know, and it's just crazy because they want to use you because they know that you're Caucasian and you're American, and it's easier for us to just get across the border, right? They don't ask us as many questions. They don't give us the fifth degree. At least at that point in time in life, right? I've watched the news recently. I've been watching all these Congress things, and there is some crazy stuff going on the border right now. So it's completely different than probably today, right? So, just that being said, that was back in 2006, 2005 when that happened.
Yeah.
So, boom. That being said, get locked up, get back to Utah. This is my first stab at recovery, right? And I want to hit a little bit of some recovery where my life started to have an opportunity. So bam, yeah, get to Utah, get back to Utah, get flown across, and I have to go to rehab. That's what the judge tells me. I got to go do this 45-day program, or I stay at the program for like a year, 16 months. It's a long program. There's guys that were there for 16 months, and they just more or less said you're gonna do a 45-day assessment. If you do good, we'll let you go home. If not, you're gonna stay in the program. So of course I manipulated the program the best I could. It was the Odyssey House in Salt Lake. They have these encounter cards they want you to write on, and it's pretty much snitching on other people's what they want you to do.
So if you go to like a rehab or like if it's court ordered, like obviously, like if you have some charges, you have to go. But
Yeah.
like some random person, like in your family, like no criminal history, they can't just force them to go. Like you have to have a criminal record, and then they can actually like mandate you to go. Is that how that
Yeah,
works?
yeah, that's how it goes. And in today's day and age, sorry.
No, you're
In
good.
today's day and age, I would say they don't really necessarily they kind of court order it, but the way I've seen it is they wait for the individual to actually want treatment. Like if you want treatment and you go to the judge and say, "Look, I got a problem. I need help." They're going to say, "Okay, we're going to court order you now to find a rehab." And they actually generally give you resources to find rehabs, or at least the rehabs will give you the resources to sign up for Medicaid, to sign up for what you need to get into these. Because Odyssey House as an adult, there is another adult rehab, Odyssey House, that a lot of people from where I'm from get sentenced to. And they help you get Medicaid and funding for that program, right? Because it's a 6-month program to a 2-year program. You actually do an outpatient program with them too for a while. I think they provide sober living. A lot of people are against going to Odyssey House because of how long it is and the way it's structured. And it's really a lot of people. It's weird because there's different rehab facilities and they all have a different concept. And this one is like, hey, we're gonna suck the state and federal government dry of money because that's who's going to pay. We're going to make it as long as we can so we can get money. And hopefully you guys stay clean and sober after this, right? That's kind of like the deal. Like I have a really good friend that he did go to some NA meetings and stuff while he was going, but he completed the program and ended up relapsing, a few months down the road from it. Like they have this big graduation ceremony when they're done, which is cool. I'm not like it's just what I'm saying is it's up to the individual, right? And I understand that Odyssey House is doing what they can to help people, and I do understand that the longer the treatment, generally, in my opinion, the better the help for that individual. But a lot of people get real negative and sour towards the end of it, and they just the people I've met that have done it, I've heard of some successful cases too, and there's some successful cases every treatment, but it's like this weird mentality,
Well, it's weird too, dude. Like you think about it, you're gone away for 6 months, 3 months, and
Yeah.
you're not with the outside world, right? And then you come out
Right.
at the end of this program, and it's like, hey, what job are you going to land, right? With the
Right.
record or whatever, you're probably going to
Yeah.
land some random construction job right on the low end.
Yeah.
get right back in
Huh.
sometimes those crowds, right? Like the crowds where
Yeah,
it's like, hey, dude, let's, I got this or that. So that's a tough place to be, you know?
it is. That does happen. Um, So yeah, that being said, that's kind of how the government or court system, but there are other treatment facilities. I went to this rehab up in Eden, it's up in the mountains. It's a mountain um, place. Um, it's more of a AA ran facility, you can say. So I'll kind of continue back from where my story is because we'll touch on that too as we go forward. So there I was, first stab at treatment to get clean and sober. And the court system was why I was going to get clean and sober, or they were pushing me to, right? I get out of there. I do good at the facility. I rat on myself. I write encounters on myself. That's how I get through that program. Um, they commend me for that, whatever, right? I kind of manipulate it because I'm not going to write encounters on other people. Get through that program, get home. At this point, they don't want me back in school. It's kind of funny because I had some really good. There was a police officer that arrested me a lot, that liked me, that tried writing on my behalf to go back to school because I was doing good when I got out for a while. But needless to say, I'm like, screw, I'm just gonna get my GED and I'm just gonna get off probation. Because I'm about 17 at the time. Well, by the time I get my GED, I'm about 17. Um, I get off probation, I get my GED, but then I start drinking again real heavy, right? I start drinking all the time. 17 years old, drinking all the time, getting some tickets. And then this one police officer, he lets me go this one time because I throw it in his face that he doesn't care about me or my family, yada, yada, right? The whole spiel is a drunk kid, and I've already had several alcohol tickets, and I'm throwing a fit, trying to get out of it. Well, he drives me to my grandpa's house, lets me out, and like a week, maybe 3 weeks later, I'm drinking again. This is like literally 2 weeks before I turn 18. I ended up getting in a fight with this guy at this restaurant. And it was so stupid because I was just drunk, buzzed up, and I'm pretty sure I was acting some type of way. And this older gentleman didn't take kindly to how I was acting or whatever. I don't think I did anything really wrong. I didn't engage or nothing. I might have like winked at the guy or something, right? And we get outside and we're scrapping, I guess, I do remember, I guess we're not scrapping at this point. He tried tackling me. I remember getting out of there and this guy coming after me and I'm telling him to not. I don't remember much after that. But what happened was I come to as the police car is in front of me and the lights are on. My shoes, I don't have my shoes on. There's blood on my shirt, but it's not my blood. I don't know what's going on. But I guess what I did is I dragged this dude. I beat him up. I dragged him, put his head between the concrete, the curb, and I just started kicking his head in between this tire and this concrete. So with that being said, not cool at all. But that's where my aggression took me to because also I was drunk, right? Um, Drinking for me is a blacked out blur, and I do things that I do not commend, and I don't want to ever do, right? That's why I don't drink. But with that being said, that same police officer dropped me off is the one that arrested me. So he threw a bunch of charges at me. This charge was an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. It put me going to prison. That's necessarily what it was. My mom was having conversations with one of her old friends, and he had kids that were had same situations or knew people in the same situation. I had a felony charge for that distribution of marijuana already previously, and I can't remember if it was dropped at the time or we were talking about dropping it when I turned 18, or maybe it was when I got my GED. I can't remember. That was kind of a long time ago, but I know there was something with that felony played an effect with me now getting a second degree felony, which was aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, that those combined together put me going to prison. And I spent my 18th birthday in jail. Like I was in the juvie hall. I got transferred to jail at 18. And I cried. There was a point in time that I cried because I was like, I'm going to prison, right? My charge as an adult puts you going to prison from a 1 to 15. Like that's what it already is set at. And I was like, shit, like I'm a minimum of a year in prison. I got this attitude anyway. I already have a whole completely wrong concept of what being a man is because of the way I grew up. With that being said, 18, my mom did take me to some AA meetings previously before this. I'm pretty sure we started going to AA. I didn't really listen to them though, you know. And for me, it took AA. It really did. The treatment, the court orderings, and all those things, they never really worked for me. I did counseling upon counseling, and it didn't necessarily work at that time. And wasn't working either. But AA is today my foundation of my program and my recovery that I would say that I have today. And AA doesn't cost no money, right? My mom, she would just take me to the meetings and I could just be there. And I was a drug addict too. And that was mainly my main thing was drugs, but I did drink a lot. But, you know, going to AA. There wasn't really NA as much where I lived in a small town. So smaller towns, resources are a little bit harder. So with that being said, in jail, I ended up getting out because it ended up being self-defense. Some witnesses saw everything go down, and this guy came after me. He was an adult, right? That's another thing, right? The guy was kind of held to a different standard because he was like 35. I was really actually 17 when the time happened. I was backpedaling, I guess, and when we were outside, and the guy was coming after me swinging. And I think that was like the kicker, right? People wrote this in their statements of what happened. That's why they didn't charge me with the aggravated assault. I got charged with a simple assault, which wasn't a big deal. The guy did get a concussion. He did go in the ambulance and stuff in the hospital, but he didn't show up to court either. There were several little components that kind of happened that worked in my favor. And it all happened at this weird time. Like I wanted to go home, but I was also going to settle to go to youth prison. That's what me and my lawyer was going to talk about. One of my brothers was in jail at the time, and he tells me to tell my lawyer I just want to go home. You know, he says, just always tell me you want to go home. So they'll look and try to perceive it the best they can to get you to go home instead of settling. Because as soon as you start saying, hey, I'm going to settle for this, they just aim for that. They don't aim for you to go home when there's always a possibility you can just go home and something could happen, right? Like there's just always that possibility. And for me, that kind of possibility kind of arose. But it was going to arise either way because of the witness statements. He says, "Okay, we got a really good case. We're probably not going to charge. We're going to fight this to not get charged with the aggravated assault." Then I went to court, and the judge saw the witness statements as well. The guy that was involved, he didn't show up to court at all. So they were just like, "The guy's not here to defend his side. We have these witness statements, and we got this kid. We're going to charge you with a simple assault, Class B misdemeanor, and we're going to release you." I was just like, hell yeah, right? Like, cool. So with that being said, after that, this is where I really started into the blue collar career. You know, I start in the oil field. I start trying to gather my life. And with that being said, I drank a lot still. You know, I got out, I quit going, trying to do AA for a while. Get out, started working as a welder's helper for this company. And we're working at Anadarko's field. I'm working 12, 14-hour days. You know, $14 an hour. This is back in 2008. Pretty good money, right? I'm making good money. I'm busy all the time. I'm working. It was really, and I enjoyed it. Honestly, I enjoyed it, but I was working with that my mom's boyfriend that I told you about earlier. At this time, he got me the job. He kind of took me under his wing, per se. And that's kind of how we started getting along. And prior to this, there was a time where he actually hit me a few times as a kid, and they tried locking me up. My grandpa came over, and he stood up for me. My grandpa grabbed me from my mom's house, and yada, yada. So there was already bad blood. I didn't like working with him, but I needed a job. So there I was. Oil field, baby. Oil field, Roosevelt raised. Doing what was projected to be done my whole life.
Dude, that's your radio voice. That sounds good.
That's my radio voice, yeah. Here I am, Joshua Richman, coming at you live from the basin. So, you know, and that was cool. I ended up coming in some money after my dad, when he died, he left me some money working in the oil field. I ended up taking 6 months off from work, and I go blow all my money in the city, and it's just whatever, right? And I come back home. I want to get clean and sober again. I mean, I was using some methamphetamine, maybe a little bit of Oxycontin at the time. smoking a little bit of weed and drinking, and I quit. I quit everything again. Well, kind of funny. We'll kind of dabbling because the whole selling drugs thing. 'Cause I did that this whole time too, and prior I was always selling weed. Like that was kind of like there was a time that when I was about 17, as I got locked up for, I got locked up for. I started kind of doing that quite a bit, and it provided a lot of income for me because I would do that for spells between jobs or whatever. But anyhow, that's neither here or there. It's just kind of dipping into some stuff we talked about earlier. But with that being said, I come back. I started working again. I can't remember. I thought, oh yeah, this is when my brother passed away. So I started working for this company, and cool company. We're making $14 an hour again. I am a roustabout at this time, so I just kind of do whatever they want me to do. It's kind of a roustabout thing, right? You just do whatever, and I loved it, And I was starting at this point being trained that I'm very competitive, so I want to be to work before anybody else's work, right? That's just my mentality. And later down the road, like it's kind of funny because the blue collar has shaped me also into the man I am today. It's not just like AA shaped me all the way. It did a main part of it. I would say AA did the main part, but because of the places I've chosen to work to and being around those men, a lot of people even listen to this, they've probably been through some of the same stuff and been through those things, and they understand, they're in that workforce, and we all kind of carry each other in a positive manner in a lot of ways of what a real man is, at least in my eyes, and what I've grown to be. So with that being said, I worked for this company for about 6 months. And my older brother, Lad, I just started getting close to him. He's my dad's oldest son. We were just getting get close to each other, and he ends up shooting himself. And I try to go to work, right? Try to go to work, and my boss yells at me, tells me why am I even there? Like I shouldn't even be there, right? And I was like, I just want to work and forget everything that happened. Well, that being said, I continued on this heroin binge because I ended up leaving work. I take some time off. I start using heroin, start selling heroin. Now we're going to dip into some of the God stuff because this is where I really want to change. Like the heroin really was a dark and evil time of drugs. I want to change so bad. And I call my mom because she's been involved in recovery, AA stuff. And one little ticket before I hit this, I do remember as a kid, the first time I ever prayed, the ceiling, and you call me crazy, but it glowed. Like it glowed gold. And I did carry that with me. I've always had a faith in God or whatever that is. I've had a faith in my whole life. I thought it was mad at me because it took my dad and I was 2. So with that being said, here I am trying to get clean and sober. Call my mom. My mom calls this lady Kit. She's involved with some nonprofits, or she has money or raises money, or maybe she has some government money. I can't remember how exactly she operated at the time. But my mom calls her. My mom's like, hey, Josh, we're going to get you in treatment. I'm going to call Kit. I'm going to find out where we're going to take you, where we're going to get you to. And I'll call you back. And I'm like, okay. With like a half gallon of vodka in my hand. Okay, mom. Okay. Right. Because I'm trying to numb myself because I'm withdrawing from heroin so bad. And alcohol was always the easiest vice to get a hold of. So my mom calls her. Kit actually has no funding at the time. She can't help me. My mom calls me back. We can't help you, son. My mom's crying. I want to help you. I don't know what to do. My mom hangs up the phone and I'm like, this is my life. This is my life. My mom pulls over and she says a prayer. Sincere prayer. She don't know what or how, but please help my son. Help my son. They're my mom and she's praying. And literally like within like minutes, a family walks into Kit's office and they say, hey, we just came into some money. You helped our daughter get into treatment and take care of her. We want to offer some money to help somebody. And Kit said, matter of fact, I just had one of my good dear friends call me and her son needs help. And I just rejected them because we can't help them. Would you please be willing to help this family? Kind of deal. Would you be willing to help Josh more or less? And they're like, yeah, whatever it takes. And it was an expensive detox. I ended up going to a detox and it was pretty expensive. It wasn't cheap by any means. So this family funds me to go to detox. My mom calls me. Kit calls my mom as my mom gets back on the road. and she's crying. And then the kid tells her what's going on, and my mom's just like, "Oh my God, my son's gonna get saved!" Right? Like all these freaking awesome things of emotion. I mean, everybody can always say what they want about prayer or their religious beliefs, and it's all cool. I agree with little bits of stuff. I have my own beliefs. I just have found in my life that for some reason this force or whatever it is, it works, you know, and generally it works when there's a real genuine thing going on or something. Anyhow, that being said, mom calls me, I'm going to detox. And thank God for that, right? So this is my second stab at some recovery. I go to a detox, I ride a scholarship, I get into this $20,000 program, go there. Needless to say, I learn a bunch of stuff about psychology. They want me to draw pictures, and this is why I am the way I am, yada, yada. I get out of there. I relapse again. I shoot heroin for the first time. I die. My little sister finds me dead. Ambulance comes, shoots me in the heart with adrenaline. I come back to life, and that's a whole nother thing, right? I just want to kind of dive into more of where my life has changed, right? Because here I am. I went to several treatment facilities, and they just haven't worked for me, you know? So I get out of there, and I want to get clean and sober again, but I go on again for like off and on for like 2 years. I do start working for this company in the oil field again as a roustabout. I become a foreman at 21 because now here we are. I'm 21 years old. I become a foreman. I'm actually helping run this company, like one portion of it, right? I'm doing billing. I'm helping another crew out while I'm running my crew. And I got a brand new freaking truck. You know, 21 years old. I've always been a pretty good hard worker, I feel like, and I've had pretty good charisma. That's all played a good role. When I'm clean and sober, right? Like I am that way. And with that being said, things really started taking off for me. But then eventually I ended up relapsing again. I don't know what to do. I relapse, I lose this job, and then I go to another oil field job, right? And I kind of bounced around a lot from oil field job to oil field job. Um, I always use like stupid excuses. Well, why'd you lose your last job? Well, they ran out of work or whatever, right? Because that was a common thing that happened for companies where the line of work I was in the oil field. You know, a company would run out of work for a little while, so people would migrate to another company for a while. Then while that company was looking for other work, and then they'd get work, and then they'd hire a bunch of people again. It was kind of like a common thing. I kind of use that a lot for my excuse. But needless to say, it was drugs and alcohol. That's what was going on. And then eventually, I hit a point again that I lose a job, struggling. I'm couch surfing. I want to change. And my sister gets out of a rehab, and she hands me this number. It's for this facility. I won't even really say much of a facility because it's a cabin. It's up in the woods. So where I live now, I live in Clearfield or Ogden, and it's up in the mountains from where I live now. But I decided to go try this rehab out. And honestly, it was because I was trying to make my mom happy. I had a couple court cases going on, just some basic stuff. Just want to make the judge happy. But I go to this place. We'll call it a facility. But this place, not really a facility. I mean, it is, I guess, but it's ran differently than any program I've ever been to. And it's an AA 12-step program. That's what it is. I get there, and there's some really profound things that are said. You know, this guy today is my grand sponsor because I have a sponsor and I still work the steps on a daily basis. It's not like I just graduated them and stopped. I still work them on a daily basis. He was like, you can lie to me. You can lie to this guy. You can lie to your parents. You can lie to the judge. But the only person you can't lie to is yourself. And I was like, dude, this dude's being rude up in here. What is he saying? You know, like that's how I took it. And I thought he was kind of like talking trash. And I was like, man, what's wrong with me though? Why am I taking it this way? Because at this point, I'm starting to realize like my emotions mean something, but I don't know exactly what they mean, right? I always acted out negatively. If somebody talks to me like that, generally I'd get up and I would argue with them, or I'd become a problem because I'm a rebel, right? What, you know, fuck you, like you're a liar. You know, that's why I started doing some dumb stuff. And I didn't. I took that. I went to my room and I internally was like, bro, you're lying to yourself right now. And I was like, what? You know? Now here I am talking to myself. No, you're lying to yourself right now. You're lying. You're here because you say you're here because you want to change, but you're here for the judge. You're here for your mom. Do you really want to change? Or what do you want to do? At this point, I'm starting to practice a little prayer too. Because I'm like maybe a week in, and they kind of say, hey, you know, practice prayer, practice these things. You know, the first step is admitting I'm an alcoholic. The second one is to, no, third one is come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me back to sanity. Two, oh man, why am I I'm brain farting right now? I had to memorize these two at one point. So it's funny, but it's really to deal with a higher power. The second one, no, the second one is came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. Three is made a decision to turn my will and our lives over the care of God as we understand Him, right? So the first three steps are like admitting I got a problem. The next two steps are trying to find a power greater than myself to restore me back to sanity, whatever that may be. So I'm practicing those things. That's why I'm able to look at myself and say, dude, you are lying. And then I realized I was like, I really do want to get clean and sober. So I actually made a bookmark that says, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for me. And what that contributed into while I'm working my steps was it hit a point where I made the decision to go to a sober living instead of go back home. I'm from a small town, Roosevelt, Utah. I made a decision to stay living in the city where I have no family or anybody to enable me or any of those things, right? And that's what I decided to do. Even though my mom was like, you can come back, you know, she didn't really, like, she didn't want me to, but she did because she's my mom. She loves me. And my mom, by the way, at this point, I think she dropped me off at a homeless shelter twice already because she wanted me to change. She wanted me to grow up and she didn't know how to help me, you know, and she knew that she was enabling me at times and she wanted me to change. So I made that decision and AA became my life. It became, it gave me purpose, right? It was free. It didn't cost no money. I was able to go to these places and get involved in communities that want only better for themselves, their families, and their lives, right? And there's just there's an instruction guide right here, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an instruction guide to change your life, to help you through all these problems and issues. And it even says in there to not stop. Don't stop at the big book, you know, because there's another book me and you have talked about, and I'm pretty sure we'll dive into a little bit. But the power of one more, you know, AA taught me to not just stop there, find other literature, find other stuff that's going to contribute. And a lot of them start to speak the same language, man. You know, it's just, I needed to hear my story from somebody that's been through exactly almost what I've been through. When I decided to start hitting my knees and praying, it took me listening to a guy that was tattooed up on his neck, tattoos everywhere, telling his story at this treatment facility in front of 60 or 80 people, him telling his story. And he's like, you know what? I decided to hit my knees, put my shoes under my bed, and then hit my knees every night. And now here I am, 3 years, clean and sober at the time. You know, he was saying, I was like, if this dude can get down and pray on his knees, I'm going to start getting down and praying on my knees. And I started to then, you know, but it took me having to hear it from a certain person to become open-minded enough to hear it from other people. You know, I needed to hear people that have been through what I've been through, because the treatment facilities I went to prior, there were always people that were college degrees, never had an alcohol problem or drug problem. You know, they might have had a long lost cousin with a drug problem, but they never really did nothing to help that individual. That was generally the story. So it was like, how can you help me? Because you don't know how I truly feel. But it took somebody that knew how I feel to say, I know how you feel. It's time to grow up and let it go. And it was like, whoa, you know, bam, slap
Well,
in the
that's the
face because
thing
they were
too,
right.
man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like having you on the show for
yeah,
me, you know, listening to the power of one more. I was listening to that and then I saw you walk into work and I was like, you know, we talked before, I knew your story.
yeah,
I see your stuff on social media, but I think realness tracks realness, right? Like when
yeah.
somebody's genuine, and that's like with leadership. We talked about this the last couple episodes. When you're in charge of a team, or when you're at work and you're interacting with your team, if you're genuine with your team and you truly care about them, they're gonna you can't bullshit that. You know, just like
Right,
this guy that's tatted up on his neck, and he's like, dude, this is what helped me, and that was like that
right.
light bulb moment for you, which is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny you bring up some leadership stuff because I started before so the 4.5 years I had clean and sober, which, you know, was due to going to AA, being involved, being a part of some nonprofit organizations, helping out where I could, and always helping the next individual. Um, I started getting involved and getting into leadership into some where I used to work, Associated Foods. You know, I became a lead worker, so I trained guys. But with that being said, I started to find that these leadership qualities, but how do I progress those leadership qualities? So you bringing that up, I went to some people that I've found as leaders in my life, and I've asked them, what are stuff that you have done to become a better leader? Or what's a book that you would pick up or you would tell somebody to read? And I just want to say one of my really good friends, he I hit him up when I started working at Nucor. And I asked him for some stuff, and this dude's got his bachelor's degree in business and administration. Oh, not even bachelor. I think he's got his master's degree now. The dude's really high up where he works. Yada yada. Awesome dude. I met him in AA too, right? And that dude has excelled at everything in his life. And I think it's because of the principles of what AA taught, but he grew. He grew more. But he instructed the servant. It's a leadership book, and I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And it's not like any other leadership book I've ever read, but it's actually about Jesus. And it's kind of a trip, man. But you really look at like Jesus became a leader because he was the servant. He became this role model because he helped you and was right next to you. He didn't expect you to do this. He wasn't a manager or whatever, right? You kind of start to see these titles and how people are like, hey, you go do this and do that while I do this, right? The best leadership, it was him. And if you look at like all the centuries, regardless if he was a child of God, you can even take God out of it and just say this guy that walked the earth did this. Today, he is the hugest leader in our world just for the factor of the role model he was. Like, and it's just a trip, to think about that because these practices have passed on. And now when you see people that are really kind and nice and they're right next to you and they have compassion, it's kind of funny because us as men, as we grow up, especially in the blue collar world, a lot of us get real sarcastic with each other too, or construction or criticism, and I'm not necessarily knocking it all, but honestly, I've noticed people that are very positive and uplifting, it has much more of a return on the inside and outside of work than people just talking shit to each other all the time. Like we all kind of banter, and there's that little bit, which is cool. I started looking into some of this stuff a little bit more on the psychology thing. Sorry, I just bring it up because it's a recent thing that I kind of was
No, you're
getting
good.
into reading. Because I had a friend that he was criticizing me, throwing shade at me for my Facebook stuff. Because I have a Facebook for recovery, and if you guys, as you're listening right now, my name is Joshua Richman. If you ever got questions at any other state for treatment, you have questions about finding the resources, I'm more than willing to help you find those resources. If I don't have somebody that lives in that state that might be willing to actually physically be there and help you, I have a lot of people that I do talk to from other states. But with that being said, I had this guy throwing some shade at me, and he's criticizing me, and I know he doesn't mean it badly. Like I know he's trying to like that's just his mentality because he's just been that way for so long. But today I don't have to put up with that, and it kind of hit me in some way. And I started reading like, why do people act like this? Well, a lot of people that are criticizing like that generally have a lot of their own insecurities, their own faults. They have their own things going on, and there's ways to try to deal with them. Or you can just move on from those people. In this day and age, I can just block. Like, I just pretty much hung up on the dude. I was like, dude, I'm an adult, bro. I have boundaries. You're saying a bunch of shit that is affecting me emotionally, internally. Like we're just done, right? I just went and blocked him. And I just move on because I don't really want to deal with it. Like I'll run into the guy again physically, and we can have that conversation. And those conversations are better than over the phone. Sometimes I had an individual, same situation kind of happen, and we had an actual heart to heart. And he's like, dude, I actually love what you do. And I was like, that's fine, but what I do is for other people. It's not just for me, right? It is for me because it helps me, but it's for other people. And as soon as you affect that for me emotionally, now I don't want to do it because I'm having insecurities because of it. I don't want you part of it. And it's because I don't want those insecurities. So what do I got to do that? And it's literally lay down boundaries and be assertive with people and let them know, I was like, because then he realized, he's like, hey, I'm not seeing your content anymore. What's going on? I said, this is exactly what's going on. You aroused some insecurities, you aroused some things in me. I didn't like it. You kept bantering me and labeling me as something. So I just blocked you. And I was waiting for you to see that I blocked you so we can have this conversation. And I was like, I genuinely like and love you as an individual. And he said the same thing to me. I said, that's fine. It's just today I have that choice and that option. Block it and move on until we can have this conversation face to face and that individual is ready to realize like, hey, I do support you. Because if you don't support me, like I don't want you in my life. That's just plain and simple. If somebody just wants to talk crap and whatever, I don't need that. Like, my life has changed today, and I used to be a people pleaser. Today I'm not. I don't want to be a people pleaser. I just want to keep growing in my life and living happy and helping others. People throwing shade, yada yada. You know, as we grow older, we realize. I believe a lot of us realize we don't have to allow people to be a part of our life. Like we just go on, right? I want to help people always, and I want to be a part of people's life in a positive way. But as soon as it becomes some kind of negative, I look at his high school stuff. It's so funny because back in high school, we used to always talk so much trash to each other. And now that I'm an adult, it's like I don't really want to do that. I want to have genuine conversations about how to better my life, better your life, or talk about family. You know, how are kids doing? You know, I don't have any kids, but you know, those things. I want to hear positive. I want that in my life. And you know, a lot of these books, man, because we're talking about books, is just they speak a lot about that. You know, you got to find your right group of people that are going to produce what you're looking for to produce in your life. You know, if I want to be a drug dealer, man, jail and prison's great. You know, if I want to learn how to be a drug dealer, there's many of them in there. But today, I don't want to be that. Today, I want to be a man of my community. I want to help out in a positive way. And I actually want to reach people more than just my community. I did that for 4.5 years with AA where I'm from. And I still do, and I still help people, right? I just had a buddy check into a treatment facility, and I called up there to make sure he made it, and he did. So I sent cigarettes up for him. You know, like that's just, those are little things today that I get to do for my community. It's just a real little thing, but when somebody, man, when I went to treatment this last time, right? When people in AA, so let's just dip into AA more because I have dipped into it a lot, but I really want to show my gratitude and what AA has done for me. So I established 4.5 years in the AA NA community at some treatment facilities. I've been to treatment facilities and I've told my story in front of countless people. With that being said, I relapsed in 2019 and it was really rough, really hard. I was driving truck at the time. I was making really good money for Associated Foods. Associated Foods helped me because when I relapsed too, I let them know what was going on. And I was like, I'm fine losing my job. I have to go back to treatment. Something went wrong and I don't know what. And they were completely cool with me going to treatment. They put me on FMLA. They paid me, and I was able to go to treatment, right? A lot of people today, in today's age, is willing to help people with drug addiction for it's such an epidemic. It really is. But with that being said, the people I met through AA never gave up on me, and they kept checking on me. Those next 3 years I relapsed, I had such a hard time. AA, people that I met in AA were the only people that really tried to help me, you know, because they've been through it. And at one point, I even was like, FAA. I was so mad at AA, you know, or NA. I was mad at these groups of people. And it came a point where I was finally ready to change again. I just got out of jail. I did a year in jail for stealing cars and semis. Stupid, right? Because honestly, I progress. Every time I relapse, I progress, right? It used to be selling drugs and whatever, which don't get me wrong, it still was that, but it progressed into other stuff. You know, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because a lot of it's just horrible. You know, I'll just throw this out there though. I went through a very bad psychosis, meth-induced psychosis, schizophrenia for a long time, and I do not take medication for that today. I do not have those problems. So if someone's also listening to this and knows somebody in their family or somebody that has the schizophrenia psychosis, maybe they need medication. I'm not going to say they don't. I'm just saying there's possibilities that if they can find something greater than themselves to restore them to sanity, they might just find another way out, you know, and they might enjoy that more. Medication made me feel numb. But with that being said, I get out. I want to get clean and sober again. It was the AA community that paid for me to go to rehab. Like, I'm hands down. I had no money. My family, they were trying to take care of me the best they could. And I say I'm going to go, I put it out on social media. I'm going to go to treatment again. Well, this place that I've been to treatment several times, they were a little hesitant, but they decided to put me back on a list to get in there. And so I put it out there, you know, I'm on the list. I'm trying to get in. I had people reach out to me, offer to pay for a full month. We'll pay for a full month, you know, if you get back in treatment. And that meant so much, but that meant so much. And I appreciate those fellows today. If they ever listen to this, I love you guys. You guys know who you are, and you guys have changed my life. And I so appreciate that. With that being said, though, I went to treatment and people just made phone calls. Hey, Josh, are you there? Yeah, this is Josh. They're like, man, how are you doing? We'd have a little conversation. They'd be like, you're speaking in sentences, you know, because they saw me at my worst once again. You know, well, they saw me at my worst and the way I was with that meth-induced schizophrenia and how I was. And just those phone calls, these people didn't even pay no money. I didn't need their money. I needed the love and the support, and they gave that to me time and time again. I felt uncomfortable at this facility because I've been up there speaking, telling my story to help other people. You know, I've sponsored people through this facility and helped them. Now here I am back in that facility. And I had this other old timer from NA that was up there one night. And he came up and he pulled me aside and says, "You know how much humility it takes to come back after you've been through what you've been through in the life you've already lived in recovery?" And I was like, damn, dude, like I needed to hear that because inside me, I just was like, "You're a piece of garbage, Josh. You suck. You didn't do it. You messed up." Because something I learned a long time ago is I have unrelenting standards. I expect this much, which you can't see, right, in the camera, of myself. And that's really the realistic factor of it. I expect something I will never be of myself, you know, and I have to be okay with right here, which is actually great and just fine. But I expect perfection out of myself, and I'm just never going to be perfect, and that's okay. You know, and these people made me realize that, and they were there for me in ways that I can't describe. So I try that with many people. Yesterday when I was boating, I had this guy reach out to me and just said, "Bro, like, thank you for just that conversation." Because I tried helping him get into a treatment facility. He reached out to me. I was like, "Bro, I'm struggling." You know, he's working on a drilling rig, blue collar. Here you are. You know, he's struggling. I'm like, we just had a conversation, and I was like, if you call these people today or tomorrow, whenever you're ready, just let them know that me and you had a conversation. You know, so they'll know. It's not even about, oh, me, Josh Richman. It's about the fact that they know somebody in the same community that had a conversation with somebody they don't know, but they're trying to reach out, right? It's about knowing that those people are reaching out and they're trying to find the resources, and now they just know that, hey, this person has been reaching out for help. It doesn't matter if they contact me or somebody or you, right? It's just the fact that the knowing of each other, that individual's, let's pull them in. Let's help them. They're trying. I don't know you, but my brother over here knows you. You know, my best friend or my friend over here knows you in the program. So let's help this individual, you know? And we all know how it goes, man. People stay around, people leave, people don't stay around. You know, it is rough because, you know, there's so many people that go through these treatment facilities that like 80 probably percent of them don't make it, man. You know, and that's rough, dude. When you really get down to some of the statistics, yeah, I think you have some too. You might have wanted to talk about, but
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, like just in general, like it's a cycle, right? Like you talk to
right,
people that have gone through like your story, like you have a lifetime full of stories, you know? Like when you said you
yeah,
were a foreman on, with that oil rig company at
yeah,
21 years old, I'm like, damn, dude, like most people, that's like their goal in their 30s, and like all the stories you
right,
have.
yeah,
One thing I think is important too, like setting goals, whether it's like in your case, when you got clean, when you decided, like you said earlier, like you had excuses, you're like, dude, I'm not going to make excuses anymore. Right.
yep,
Like we can
right,
apply that principle to anything we do, man. Like,
right,
like change is constant, right? That's going to happen. But
yeah,
I think the important thing, whenever we're setting goals, and this is something I've just learned this week, on how to be better. And I watched a video. My brother-in-law sent me a video actually, and it was talking about goals. And so many of us focus on, hey, 5 years, I want to be this, and we get
yeah,
hyper focused on that. Or like take the podcast for example, right? I'm like, in a year, I want this many followers. I want my following to be this big. When you do that, it's
yeah,
good to have those kind of out there, but I think anytime with our goals, if we can focus on the next day, right? One more
right,
day, that whole mentality of the book with Ed Milet that you had mentioned. I mean, you focus on the next task. Like, hey, I'm going to go to the gym. I want to go to the gym every day this year. It's like, dude, don't talk about the year, talk about tomorrow, right? Like,
yep,
just
yep,
get to tomorrow. You don't have to be this like amazing, you know, planner to do that. Just, I think, at least for myself, dude, when I think too far out, um, and like I'm saying, dude, it's not like you don't want to have a plan, right? But once you
right,
just
right,
plan just a little bit ahead, work on that next day, work on the tasks to get you to your goal, I think that's when the real progress happens. And I'm sure you saw that in your life, like making these decisions to like,
yeah,
dude, I'm going to get clean. And now being clean, it's not like hey, dude, like I got to be clean the next 60 years of my life, the next 70 years of my life. It's,
Yeah.
hey, I just need to go one more day, and all those days
Yeah.
compound on each other. So with your goal,
Amen.
with, being sober, whatever it may be, man, like it's just that continual effort. But, there's one thing, you brought up the book, The Power of One More. I love it. And there's one part in it, I don't want to ruin it, but kind of towards the end, and I just wanted to read it really quick because
Let's
it
hear
kind of
it.
goes,
Yeah. We
it
good.
goes with what you were saying, man. So it says, sooner or later, everything ends. No matter who you are or what you're going through, change will come to you. This is not meant to depress you. It's meant to create a sense of urgency in you. It is also to remind you that things are happening for you and not to you. That's the excuses thing we're kind of talking about. So Ed
Yeah.
Milet goes on and he says it several times in your life, you'll reach the end of a journey and you'll come face to face with one more. In these times, you'll make choices that define your character and change the course of your life. And then he ends this thought chain of, you know, of change really with, he just says you can't stop or slow down the march of time and those inevitable changes. All you can do is make the most of what you have right now. In this way, you can intentionally guide your fate. It's how you live your life with fewer burdens, regrets, anger, and sadness. And he closes with, yes, it's not easy. Change rarely is. And it's cool, dude. Like, I really wanted you on here because I think your story exemplifies what Ed was saying right there, dude. Like, it
Right.
wasn't easy. Like you went through a lot. Like you went through the cycles like most people do. You mentioned it, dude. I think there's a lot of people in the blue collar trades that struggle with drugs or alcohol. And I think in general, people in our trades and construction workers, blue collar workers, tradesmen, we kind of keep everything inside, and we
Right.
don't have that
Yeah.
conversation. Like you said, man, getting shade or getting shit because you shared
Yeah.
your story, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And in our trade, it sucks because I see that drugs are becoming less of a problem to some degree in our trades. I'm not saying it's less of a problem for the nation, but in our trades because of the constant UAs or whatever. But it's the alcohol. A lot of people think alcohol is not a big deal, and and even today, I meet people in our trades that you can tell they got alcoholism. You can tell they're alcoholic and they have all these problems in their life, but yet they show up to work every day. I get that. I understand, like, they show up every day and they do a good job, but they have these attributes about them that you can just tell they're arrogant or their ego. And generally those are all things to hide the deeper emotions that are going on. Maybe they're fighting with their wives more at home, or their kids don't want to be a part of their life because of their alcoholism, and they don't want to blame the alcohol. They want to blame something else. They don't make enough money. That'll be one thing that they'll blame. I don't make enough money at my job or something. And it's just, they're just blaming everything but the core problem. And being a fellow alcoholic, being a fellow drug addict, that is exactly what we do. And it breaks my heart sometimes when I see people like that, because alcohol is the thing you can go buy in the store. It's acceptable, and it's really one of the biggest problems out of all of them. And a
Dude,
lot of
it's
people,
it's
go
it's
ahead.
so common, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a like a social drug kind of thing, right? You brought up stats. One thing I pulled up. So this is on drug overdoses, but still important because that's a huge
right.
problem.
Definitely.
So more than 932,000 people have died since 1999 from a drug overdose. In 2020, 91,799 drug overdose deaths occurred. The age-adjusted rate of overdose deaths increased by 31% from 2019, which I mean, it's a problem, dude. And
Sure.
I don't know, man. Everybody can think about it in whichever way they want, right? Like there could be somebody listening to this podcast and be like, dude, that's not me. That's not my problem, right?
Yeah.
Or they can think about it and be like, man, I know somebody that's going through this, right? Like, and I think that's the cool thing about your story, dude. Your content, you're very positive, and you don't stop. And that's the thing, dude. Like you said it earlier, you can have your sarcasm, but there's a time for like realness too, right? I
Yep.
think
Yep.
I think about the first time we met and we talked. I don't know if you remember. You'd come down and you were kind of walking by where I was working, and there's
Yeah.
another guy right down there. And I said, "Hey, man, what's up?" And you're like, "Hey, I'm Josh." And I said, "Hey, that's Zach. he's deaf,
Oh
man.
yeah,
He
yeah,
can't really
yeah,
hear.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're gonna
Go
have to
ahead.
just walk by him, and you go up to him, and or I think I told you he was like autistic. I don't remember what I said, but you went over there and
Yeah,
you're like,
like you said, he's
hi.
autistic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you gotta talk slow to him.
That's how slow. So but I mean, after that, dude, like that kind of like broke the ice. And
Yeah,
then I
yeah,
remember our next conversation, you started talking about your life, dude. And it was so like,
yeah,
it was dang, it's like, man, that was
yeah.
real. So, I mean,
Right.
that sarcasm, like breaking down the barriers, but just being a normal, good person. You kind of mentioned
Amen.
it earlier, dude, like talking about the principles, the greatest leader. What was that book called?
Right. The servant.
The Servant.
Yeah,
Like you
and
said,
that. Yeah,
take the name out of it, dude. Like you could change the name from like Jesus to like Tim or like
yeah,
Jason. You live
right.
principles like that. Not saying that you have to believe like that, right? But
Yeah,
if you live those type of principles and just basic human decency, one of the things I love about Nucor,
yeah,
working there, they teach you in this leadership class, and they said we don't believe in the golden rule, and everybody knows the golden rule: treat others the way you would want to be treated. And I remember they said we don't believe that here at Nucor, and I was like, what the freak, dude? I was like taken
right,
back. I was like, what the
right,
hell? And then they said we believe in the platinum rule, and that is to treat others the way that they want to be treated. Not everybody's like you, right? Everybody's different,
right.
and I
Oh,
love
that's
that.
pretty good. That's so
This
good.
It's good, dude. And the second part
Yeah,
to that is if you're going to do that, if you're going to live the platinum rule and treat others the way that they want to be treated, you got to know them, right? You
yeah,
got to
yep,
take the time to know somebody. So
yeah.
I think it's special, man. Your story. I got one final question I ask everybody that comes on the show. If you could tell yourself something when you were 18 that you've learned now, or if you could give advice to somebody in your shoes at 18, what would it be?
It would be at 18. It would be find a group of people, whether whatever it be. There's so many groups of people this day in blue collar, entrepreneurs, recovery, religion, just whatever. Just find a group of a few people, maybe up to 10, that are going to try to help you excel. That's not your family, people that you can bounce ideas off and get different perspectives, because it's completely different. Your family's going to give you perspectives from their love and their life experience to you, but it's not always what you need. You need the outside, like even like you, Dave, you, Coke. Like I need that extra outside perspective of what I'm doing with my life and the direction I'm going, because not always my family knows exactly what makes me happy. They know what makes them happy, but just like even if you, when you find the circle, you're gonna find people that they will still be that same way. It's just finding a group of people that are gonna help push you. I wouldn't say go to the clubs and find somebody. I wouldn't say go to the bars and find somebody. I'm not saying all that's got a negative thing, but find a group of people that's gonna push you to be better. Even if that's in fitness, finding a coach. Finding a mentor, a positive mentor though, somebody that you've seen or know has been through stuff that you can talk to that's outside of your family. I would suggest that strongly. As well as work your ass off, man. No matter what you do, what you're gonna do, you try to be the best individual there. And if you ain't 15 minutes early, you're late. Practice those. That's what I would say.
One thing we had Riley Yates on. It's so cool, dude, to hear you talk about like, hey, get a community, get people that are going to
Right.
tell you the truth kind of thing. And like Riley had mentioned, like his wife, get people, and I know my wife does this for me, get people that are going to correct you and help you, right?
Right.
And don't take offense to it. Have that humble approach, kind of like you talked about earlier. And that is such a big part of getting better, right?
Right.
You want somebody that's positive, that's not just going to, tickle your ear and say, hey,
Yeah.
dude, you're doing awesome. We want to be challenged. We want to be better. And when people do that, thinking about it and like, hey, man, thank you. Thanks for sharing that with me,
Right.
because I do want to be better. But,
All right. Yeah.
I just want to put out this number to anybody out there that's been listening. The AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous hotline, the number is 866-210-1303. This is just a free hotline for anybody. You can give it to your friends, family. And then also, we talked about suicide a little bit today. Anytime a guest brings anything like that up, I always just want to throw in the National Suicide Crisis Lifeline. And that's just 988. And you can share that with people that are struggling or anything like that. I think it's just good to have the information out there. But I appreciate you, Josh. And I hope you guys could take this and and really listen to it. I mean, it's crazy to hear the stories from the start, but the redemption that he has, dude, is awesome. So thank you,
Thank
Josh.
you.
And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
See you guys. Thank you.
See you, dude.